Welcome to Inspired Change, a new inspirational and motivational broadcast that strives to empower men in a positive way, designed to educate, empower, and inspire even the busiest individual on the go over that first cup of coffee. Please join me in welcoming Gunter, international psychologist, author, speaker, and producer.
Okay, welcome back everybody to another episode of Inspired Change. So it's been another fairly eventful week on a personal level. I treated myself to a new car, which I'm enjoying greatly. But there's also been some other challenges that have come up, and especially thinking about the last couple of days in my clinical work. And again, as you may or may not know, about 95% of my practical work, my clinical work in coaching and counselling and therapy is with men. And it persistently brings up really interesting, sometimes confronting issues that we as men face. Now, in the last episode, I talked about, the issue about anti-feminism and how we've got to drop it. And I'm going to leave that for the time being. I'm sure we're going to get back to it. I haven't seen any comments yet, but I'm sure that they're going to emerge. But I want to take a look at why it is that I think I want to really help men to change. Now, the obvious thing is that if we look at it, our health statistics and our mental health statistics in particular aren't very, very good. But I think there's a few other issues, and that is that I think culturally and in our society, we're really not allowing ourselves to think about the root causes of the problem. We keep trying to focus more on the symptoms rather than the underlying cause. But there's another issue with this, and that is, how do we connect with each other? Now, we've got a culture that's technologically extraordinarily sophisticated these days. We have the written word, the spoken word, we have audio-visual, we have digital. But for some reason, that, especially the digital medium, is being used for the dark side often more than it is for the light side, for the educational side of it. And part of it makes me think about the fact that there is a broader agenda about keeping people in the dark. And so in response to that, one of the things that I established a couple of years ago, and I kept going for a while, with the exception of this year, is a thing called Manifesto. And yes, it's a play on words. Manifesto. Now, according to Wikipedia, a manifesto is a published verbal declaration of the intentions, motives and views of the issuer, be it an individual, group, political party or a government. A manifesto usually accepts a previously published opinion or public consensus, or promotes a new idea with prescriptive notions for carrying out changes the author believes should be made. It is often political or artistic in nature, but may present an individual's life stance. Now, here's the thing. My particular life stance is absolutely about making good men great. So that whole position has come about through 35 years of working in psychology and counselling and psychotherapy, and also in community education. I'm deeply, deeply concerned that we are continuing to operate in a world where men are conflicted, they're in pain, they're struggling. Now, that's not because we're incompetent. It really is because we've got expectations placed on ourselves socially that are difficult to maintain. And so part of the process of making good men great was to establish a platform, to have a forum where we can have meaningful conversations about the joys and the struggles of being in this particular time and place. And that conversation does really need to go beyond issues like mental illness, suicide and divorce. The conversations that we need to have need to include these issues but not be defined by them. So part of this platform is also that we really need a curriculum that educates men. And what I mean by educates men is that we need to get educated about ourselves psychologically. There's been a big thing about emotional intelligence. And, to be fair, despite the fact that we're having lots of conversations about emotional intelligence, there doesn't seem to be a concerted effort or push to really educate everybody, including children and teenagers, in what emotional intelligence is really about. Now, in my book, the way that I define emotional intelligence is that it's really about creating an environment where I can really become more and more self-aware. And that requires introspection and it requires reflection. I need to be able to look into my inner world and see what's going on there. And that takes courage. And so, from my perspective, any curriculum, any process that looks at helping men to understand themselves and what it's like to be better husbands, fathers, friends, and citizens actually looks at this whole process of self-awareness first. Because the other parts of emotional intelligence is about flexibility, not being rigid. And unfortunately, our culture is based on often very rigid principles about what masculinity is about. Now, the first thing I'm going to suggest that we really need to focus on chucking out is binary definitions about masculinity and femininity. And we need to actually open it up because there's many ways to be a man. And as much as there are many ways of being woman. And that's really, really important. So that flexibility of abandoning rigid attitudes, beliefs, perceptions, opinions, and really work at exploring alternatives. And this is particularly relevant now with the COVID-19 thing, where we are being challenged to think outside the box, get out of the square. I've talked before in podcasts about the man box, how are we as men defined? Think about your own journey in this. What was it that you learned when you were 4, 5 and 6 about being male? And then later on as a teenager, what is masculinity? What is it to be male, to be a man? And we would have been given all sorts of, abstract and concrete definitions. General Patton described, masculinity as being based on duty. Well, that's good, but is that all there is to it? I don't think so. So I want to talk about this project of going beyond simply thinking of what it means to become a man, but rather I want to look at the process, about the values, about the right actions and the appropriate relationships. How do I conduct myself with others? We have lots of examples at the moment about what not to do. We live apparently in a time when truth is an extraordinarily fluid idea that's constrained and abstracted and beaten up in all so many ways. It's scary. So let's take the fear out of this and replace it with courage, because it's at that point where I can confront some of the very meaningful issues that are attached to this. Like, how do I speak my truth? How do I live my truth? How do I project a sense of empowerment? And part of that comes through my action. So when someone talks shit, I'm going to challenge them on it. And in the last podcast, that was what I was talking about when I said anti-feminism, let's lose the attitude, because that's talking shit, basically. And that needs to stop. But we do this in so many other ways. It's the challenge of scientists and trying to make out like they don't know anything. It's the the reduction of value in academic life. It's the reduction of ancient wisdoms, the disrespect that's been shown with regard to ancient knowledge and modern knowledge, and how the two can come together and teach us some things. We recently had to face a devastating natural disaster in the bushfires, and part of the reason why it was so bad was we seemed to ignore science for economic reasons. We didn't speak to the traditional owners of the land who had millennia of experience in dealing with this environment. I mean, compared to what the original, the first people of Australia had in terms of time and learning about this place, which is over 65,000 years, white man's been here for 200. It's a drop in the ocean. It's a minuscule time frame. Yet we have the arrogance to believe and to push the ideas that we know so much better, simply because we have technologies that the First Nations didn't have. It's a nonsense, it's an arrogance, it's a hubris, and we need to start paying better attention. We need to start listening to other people. And that's one of the other things that comes up in this process about making good men great, is that we really need to learn to speak out. We hold things in. I've got the pleasure of working with a guy at the moment who's come up in the COVID-19 environment of putting together a podcast with a mate of his, where basically they're talking about men, mental health, and they're having a meaningful conversation between the two of them. And in a future podcast, I've invited them to come along so that we can share that important journey of conversation, of meaningful sharing of story, experience and knowledge to broaden it. And one of the principles in that podcast is very clear, that it's the very thing that he learned to do, is that he was going to be better off with his own mental health is if he opened up and stopped hiding things and stopped lying to himself and others. And that takes an enormous amount of courage, and a lot of us as men do not like being held accountable. We need to be accountable. We need to take responsibility. We need to take ownership. And I know I'm repeating a lot of messages that have been coming through in other podcasts, but in my line of work and in my experience, repetition will bring home the prize. It's like going to the gym. You don't go to the gym once a week and expect to, be fit. You do it regularly, every week, forever how long it takes. It's a nonsense to think that we can get things immediately. Immediate gratification is a seduction into failure, complete failure. Now, I like failure because it teaches me a lot of stuff about how to get where I want to go. Success doesn't happen in a vacuum either. Okay. So we need to continue to persist in having these meaningful conversations, and I want to invite everybody out there, especially men with men, to stop talking shit. Yes, we can touch base with politics, sport, but the best conversations are not had when we're pissed. When we have the courage to have a meaningful conversation with another man or a group of men, when we're sober and grounded, and we talk about what is our innermost fears and hopes and aspirations and the challenge that we face in that, that's when we are going to become better men and ultimately great men, because we're going to share that with others and it becomes our legacy to others. And that is a spiritual thing and it's inspirational. So each one of us, even when we haven't got degrees in psychology and coaching or whatever it is, whatever academic pursuit, can become a guide and a mentor to those around him. Getting to this stage, however, takes time, and it takes effort, and it takes courage, and it takes accepting pain and failure. But central to this theme is that as we evolve individually, we are going to be involved in creating and evolving a better culture. Culture will flow, but we need to have a clear vision about what it is that we want to see in the future. And it's not all of just about me. I appreciate that most of us need to focus on I, but if you focus on I without the context of the many, without the we, it becomes narcissistic. And so, yes, I need to be in touch with my feelings, but that's not to the exclusion of others and their feelings. Yes, I have a right to pursue happiness if I want to, pursue success, to pursue money, but not at the cost of someone else's well-being. That's just immoral. So over the next few weeks, I'm going to introduce a couple longer podcasts, again, having meaningful conversations with other men now that we can actually get together, at least here in Australia, in a studio, not worry about breaching social isolation rules, which is good. And so anyone who has any ideas or would like to participate, I'm reaching out. Be free. But remember, all conversations need to be founded on respect and on the right to hear each other out. We need to do that in hearing each other as men, but we also need to do that with our women and children in our lives, and we need to listen to our own inner voice as much as anything else. A lot of times we overwrite our intuition, and it just gets messy. So my invitation again is very, very simple. Come and join me and come on a new and exciting journey. And that journey is about making good men great. It's not necessarily going to make you the best business person. It's not necessarily going to make you the best athlete. But if that's what you're ascribing to, then the principles that I want to share and other men will want to share with you will take you a long way towards that. So until next time, more food for thought, some reflection, get flexible, be adaptive, and become resilient. Till next time.
Thank you, Gunter, and thank you for listening to Inspire Change with Gunter. Again, if you have any questions or comments or ideas for a show, you can email development@noirtainment.com. That's development@noirtainment.com. Thank you, and thank you for listening.
Love can take us higher. Love can take us so high.